The
invade our space, and we fall back.
If I'm looking down, I'm trying to follow the chat thing. So
I've kind of do that with my phone actually as well. So.
Oh yeah, I've got no keyboard access during this, by the way. So, because my computer's over there.
That's fine.
Okay, cool. So
yeah, that's why I try to keep up with it. But okay. Hi everybody. Welcome to TV Time. Today we're doing Breaking Bad, and just so everybody knows, I mean, the show's been off the air for a while now, so spoilers, sorry. But with me today to talk about it are Chris Shelton and Jeff, Godless Scummer. Hey, how you doing today, guys?
Yeah, not too bad.
Good times.
Chris, well, we start with you. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Who I am and what I do. I am a writer, YouTuber, critical thinker, and definitely professional television movie watcher.
Yeah, especially now, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Jeff?
I'm Jeff, aka Godless Scummer. Tiny little YouTube channel. I make videos on different things. I'm a advanced scientist, philosopher, and out bullshitter. So.
I guess that describes you pretty well.
The third one especially.
Okay, so we were talking about this before we went live, and this is either all of our first or second favorite TV show. So what I usually do is I ask my guests to give a brief synopsis in their own words of what the show is. So for me, I would say Breaking Bad is the journey of an antihero. And that from Walter White to Heisenberg, and whether or not he always had that in him to, all along. So that would be how I see it. Chris, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think the same thing. It's certainly a morality play, and that's how it was always intended. If you listen to what Vince Gilligan had to say about it, and it also shows quite well the repercussions and consequences, and the spheres of influence that people have, and how somebody Breaking Bad ruins everyone's life around them too. It's not just to them. It's not just all about them. So I thought I was just in terms of the brilliance of the show is that it doesn't focus on simple issues. It makes them, it takes complicated things and it keeps them complicated. And that's rare for television.
Yeah. Very good. Jeff, what about you?
A lot of what Chris just said, I probably would use to describe it. And so where I think a lot of people would say it's the story of a good guy is going bad or something. I tend to think of it as a guy who is gone from being inactive to active, but was always kind of somewhat always sort of had that in him, but let that out, I suppose. But yeah, as I said, it does explore, as Chris said, consequences of actions, and it's certainly not very. It isn't a sort of simple series, I wouldn't say at all. But I think it is epically written, and the characters are just developed brilliantly. So, be my take on Breaking Bad.
I agree. I think there's so much that Vince Gilligan got absolutely perfect about the show. Not just the writing or the cast, which I at first was concerned about, to be honest with you, because Bryan Cranston came from Malcolm in the Middle. So, we knew him as the comedy guy, the guy who did slapstick. And then to have the idea of him heading this huge drama show was, I was wondering about it. But within the first 5 minutes of the first episode, you're like, yeah, that's totally him. He's totally got this. But the character development, like Jeff said, the scenery, everything. He does everything, and I when I talk to my son about the show, I'm like, it's just pitch perfect. Everything is perfect, and there's no bad season. There's no really bad episode even. I mean, there's a few iffy things along the way, but for the most part, everybody is solid. Everything is solid, and I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
I certainly do. Out of 5 seasons, it was the only show, and I was just marveling over this when I first went through the whole thing. There was only one show that I had any real problems with. It was almost a throwaway show. It was an odd one. It was called the Fly.
I fucking knew it.
I was going to say that.
Right? Yeah, it was weird. And then I found out today, I was doing a little reading up on this for the show here. Rian Johnson is the one who directed that one. He directed 3 of them.
Oh shit!
And Rian Johnson
That explains so much.
I hate that guy for what he did to Star Wars. So I was kind of like, okay, that confirmation bias is that for me. I'll keep hating on that guy, even though he did such a great job with Looper. So anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. But other than that one episode, I was telling people for years, ever since I saw the show, not one bad episode really. I mean, even that one was a little weird, but the whole thing, to have not one bad episode really out of 5 seasons of writing. I mean, how do you pull that off? And then the cinematography, the direction, everything about it.
It's 44 minutes of Bryan Cranston trying to kill a fly, and you still want to watch it, and you still want to see if he gets the fly, if he's gonna find out about Jesse, you're just captivated by it. It's fucking ridiculous.
Exactly.
I did find that, because I will say that particular episode is probably the elephant in the room when it comes to Breaking Bad. But it still wasn't like so bad that I'm giving up on this. It was slow, but you're still, like you said, you're still watching him try to catch this fly. But by the way, Manda, should I show people what I'm wearing tonight? I'm going to stand up. Okay,
yes,
so I am in the spirit for this.
You're allowed to stand up.
Nice.
So, yeah, I thought I'd get right into the spirit of this tonight. I do have a Better Call Saul shirt as well, but
yeah.
This is one of the closest science bitches shirt I have. Because this is about as science represent as I get with my.
That's possibly one of my favourite little memes from that show that's carried on over the years. Is Jesse's science
bitches.
Possibly my favourite meme from that show.
It's funny too, because I didn't see the show when it was first airing. I was still, otherwise occupied in the whole Scientology world. So I watched it all through downloads. I caught up with all 5 seasons in the half-season hiatus before they, before the end of the last season, and actually caught up just as the last episode aired.
Wow.
So I finished it with everybody else, but just barely, right?
Barely.
And, I had not ever seen one episode of Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, okay. See.
So Bryan Cranston.
I said it wouldn't have mattered after the first few minutes anyway, but still.
Yeah. No, but it was funny because everybody kept saying that, and I just didn't have any idea what they were talking about. So then after Breaking Bad was done, I went and got all the Malcolm in the Middle and started watching them. Truly hilarious, and definitely did not. And I had never seen Bryan Cranston's, hilarious side. So it was.
I have to admit, I had watched Malcolm in the Middle. Well, I watched the first couple of seasons of it, and then I kind of got a bit bored with it. But but strangely, when I first saw Breaking Bad, because I didn't see it at first, but it was one of those shows people were like saying, "Oh, you've got to watch this. You've got to watch this." And I don't often watch, because a lot of the time people tell me that, and it's a bit lackluster. And I'm like, but I thought I'm going to watch Breaking Bad, and of course it was epic. But for some reason, I didn't. It took me a while to actually piece that this was the dad from Malcolm in the Middle, because it was
Really?
just it. I don't know why it took me a little
Well,
while.
because
to
A, he's got
realize.
hair, and B, he's 10, 15 years younger anyway. I
Yeah.
get that. No, I was after they had I caught it in the middle of the first season. After they had played the first 4 episodes, they had a marathon on AMC over the weekend, and I was stuck at my parents' during a blizzard, so ended up watching it then, and yeah, quickly got hooked on it. So
Yeah.
we've got nobody can pick Walter, because who's actually, I mean, really, whose favorite character is Walter anyway? But we'll start with favorite characters. How about you start, Jeff?
Oh, good lord! Because there's so many to choose from. But because it's weird, because obviously because of maybe the spin-off, I've kind of got kind of like Saul. But I'd say throughout the series, because he's a character I really couldn't stand him at first, but I think as the series progressed, Hank is a character that I've started to, when you started to see the more human side of Hank.
Yeah.
Because just be honest, he is actually a pretty irritating character when
Yes.
you to begin with. And I think once you start seeing the more human side of Hank, I think he's a fantastic character.
Mm-hmm. Not as bad as Marie, though. I think
Marie
Marie is
is-
probably my least favorite character.
Yeah.
I cannot fucking stand her.
Yeah, she was supposed to be a full-on bitch, and she certainly was. I mean, that's how they described her, you know. And, yeah, definitely.
So shrill, like you know, when somebody describes a shrill woman, that's who you think of, you know. So
Well, plus she was this like, you know, like she couldn't stop stealing things.
yeah, for no reason.
Klepto, right? Kleptomania.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it in a minute. But I think in a bit. But I mean, I think when I look for a lot of fans of the show, often tell me that Skylar is the character they really can't stand.
Yeah, everybody, but I understand why Skylar was the way she was. And yes,
Yeah.
I honestly think that Vince Gilligan purposely made her shrill and obnoxious as well. But you always, Carmela in The Sopranos, you know, you hate the leading lady because against an anti-hero, you're always going to, because she's always going to be the voice of reason, but you're still going to want to side with the anti-hero. You know what I mean?
And that's the weird thing, because it really does engage, because then as soon as you ask somebody, yeah, but you do realize he's killing people, he's making drugs, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
No, but
but he's so cool.
No, I don't know that you're quite giving this show the depth that it actually deserves. It was hilarious, actually, how much hate mail Anna Gunn was getting. I mean,
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
No, but I thought she was a total badass, because not only did she carry the weight of what was going on, but she also supported him at one point. But then when it got too much, she said, "Fuck no, I'm in charge now, and that's it. This is done." So right. I mean, I thought she as she's written kind of obnoxious, but I totally think she's a badass character.
So. Yeah. I was going to mention what Chris said, because some of the, I mean, Anna Gunn the actress who played Skylar, got some real vitriolic hate towards her. I mean, it was over the line stuff. It was like rape threats and stuff like that. It was really toxic. Wow. Yeah, I did. It was pretty bad. Some of the hate mail she got. But, I mean, okay, in a way, if she's playing a character that we're not supposed to like, she may have done her job very, very well there, I think. But maybe a little too welly almost, but to elicit that kind of response from people.
So, Chris, who's your favorite then?
Well, thinking about that is tough. It's a tough one, because there were elements of a lot of characters that I really, really liked. I guess if I had to choose, I'd say Jesse, because Jesse represents, you know, a lot of themes. There's a lot of things going on with Jesse. He was going to get killed in the first season, then they, you know, as the show developed, it became clear that there was so much more potential to be developed with that, and they really developed it. I mean, it was quite brilliant. So he was a lot, you know, for me, I think he was more relatable, because he was making a lot of decisions through ignorance and through just shooting from the hip, impulsive kind of decision making, young decision making.
He's the quintessential in over his head character.
It very quickly got in over his head. Thought it would be fun. Hey, this is cool, kind of thing. Falls under the spell of an authority figure a little bit in terms of this guy having been his teacher and an older guy, So there's a lot going on there with him. And him having his whole arc of redemption at the end. I mean, it's complicated, but I think he's the one I like the most, or could relate to the most. I really liked a lot of aspects of Mike as a character.
Mike,
the guy who was working for Gus, his
Mike,
Mike Ehrmantraut.
Yes,
Ehrmantraut, yeah.
Who's a much more prominent role in Better Call Saul as well, which my wife is mostly watching. I'm only sort of popping in every now and again to see what's happening with the show, but I'm not really keeping up as closely on Better Call Saul. I need to catch up on all of that. But I liked that, and I liked Skylar. I mean, to me, I never really had any of this like hate towards Skylar, but it was funny how during the show when she would be kind of complaining to him and stuff, you would feel a little bit of a, hey, shut the fuck up, bitch, right?
Right.
And then you're like, no, wait a minute, what am I saying? She's the good person here, right? She's who I would be in this scene, right? What am I saying?
Yeah.
So that was kind of funny catching that. But I thought the people who went to the hate mail route, I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah. So I love Jesse so much. He's like the most tragic, I think, character that lives, I guess.
Yeah.
Other than, well, I mean, Walt lives up until the end, so that doesn't really count. But he's pretty tragic. But he kind of, it was like Jesse went into the whole thing thinking that he was the boss because he had experience in the meth business, and right away realized, no, I'm not. But I'd have to say my absolute favorite character is Gus Fring, because he's so evil, but so calm and collected, and he's smart, and just like, plus the whole like having half his face blown off, but then him like adjusting his tie and shit. I mean, obviously not realistic, but that was badass. But I just like the fact that he comes in and he's just like this guy that manages or owns a fast food place, and he's very soft spoken, and everything is about business with him. So you see the dark side of him, like that one episode when he says nothing at all, just goes and puts after, I think it was this after Gail died. So he goes and he puts the suit on, takes that box cutter out, and just fucking slices that guy's throat right in front of him, lets him bleed out, washes up, gets in the shower, and just leaves. Like, just didn't have to say anything. But that was one of the scariest moments in the entire series.
Big time.
He is one fucking frightening dude.
Yeah.
So.
Ruthless.
I always got the feeling that Gus was what Walt aspired to be, but couldn't quite be.
Yeah, because he was emotional.
I only got that feeling.
And like the opposite of Tuco Salamanca, who was totally an idiot, kept fucking up, like killing his own guy and then just leaving him in the junkyard, and he was so emotional and everything. That was what got him killed, was because he let he kidnapped Jesse and Walt, and he let his emotions take over and just ended up getting blown to bits. When Hank showed up afterwards, but still, he wouldn't have been in that situation had he not freaked out and been emotional about everything. Whereas Gus he is brilliant, and he is to the point, and he knows what he's doing. So
yeah,
Gus is very, very much all business.
He's kind of a calculated evil. Like what he was doing, he had a very clear career path early on, as they showed. Step by step, had things really, really figured out, and yet still appears to be very nice, very easy, very sociable, very good, easy to get along with kind of person in terms of the demeanor that he presents to the world. But such a shark. Such a just black-eyed, no emotion there, just not really human.
No, he's not. And then I was always wondering, does he have a wife and kids? Because he mentions them at some point when he brings, in fact, he does this twice because he does it on Better Call Saul too. But the episode when he has Walt come over and they make that meal together and he's like, the kids won't eat it or whatever. He does the same thing on Better Call Saul. I think he has Mike over and gives the same spiel about how he loves making this meal from his hometown, but he can't because the kids won't eat it. But nowhere is it ever seen or suggested other than that moment that he's got this wife and kids. So he's got this weird persona that he doesn't not only portrays to the people at Los Pollos Hermanos, but also to the people in his crime syndicate that should know him better, but don't, because he holds them at this arm's length. And I think that is purposefully done so everybody is always on their toes about him.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Well, the symbol of Gus is one where he is a character who you are only aware of him to the degree that he wants you to be aware of him.
Mm-hmm.
You are only seeing what he wants you to see of him. And actually, I hadn't really thought about this, but when you bring up the wife and kids, I thought to myself, oh my God, I hadn't even thought that he had them. They were so under wraps, so not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just forgot about that scene. But it's interesting how his character is written in such a way that every scene he's in, all the way to his death where he adjusts his tie,
Mm-hmm.
he's in control.
Yes.
Even when he's not, and it's
that one spark of a moment when he realized the bomb was under the wheelchair and he screamed. I think that's the only time we ever really saw him, even when he got fucking gut shot and he's getting dragged across the desert and he was just like, yeah, you might need to drive because I'm about to die right here. None of that the whole fucking time until that one moment when he knows he's about to die. That's the only time he ever has that flash of emotion.
I always think that the only real character that I think drew any sort of emotion, even in a tiny way, out of Gus was Hector Salamanca.
Mm-hmm.
Because it would have been very, very easy for Gus to just off it, and Hector was really no threat to him anymore. He was like completely disabled, and you could see just that Gus was just kind of keeping him there, just because he knew it was torture for Hector all that time in that series.
Hector was the reason Gus's partner was murdered.
Right.
He was
I mean, there's
he was the one who did it.
There's history there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was.
He shot him in the head. That's right.
He was he loathed Hector and the whole family. I mean, he was going to take them down. That became the new goal at that point because they were doing this business proposition. We got this is going to be perfect. And, instead they get treated like scumbag, and his friend got shot. And,
Well, that was the one thing where I just thought Gus was taking a bit of just sadistic pleasure in having Hector in that position.
Absolutely.
Ever so slightly, but that's the one thing where you're thinking a little bit of emotions coming out there. That Gus is just getting us real sadistic pleasure in having Hector in this position where he's helpless and he's, So that's possibly the one. That's one character I thought who did bring a sort of little bit of emotion out of Gus.
Mm-hmm.
My question around his partner as well has always been, and I'm wondering if I'm the only one that's ever thought this, but I know the Chicken brothers were not actual brothers. Mm-hmm. They were partners. No. Mm-hmm. And the way that they loved each other, even in that one scene that you see him, and plus all the subsequent years of Gus speaking about his partner, I honestly think that they were lovers, not just business partners. What do you guys think?
I had the same thought, and so it clearly was somehow put there. I think from the depth of his reaction to the guy getting shot, of course, I think any of us would have quite a strong reaction to one of our friends getting killed right in front of us. But yeah,
then to hold it for years until you get your revenge, though.
That's right. Yeah, it definitely seemed like there was something there. But again, the brilliance of the writing was you never really could be sure. And then he mentions Beacon Kid, and I'm like, wow, I'd even tune that out because I would kind of been thinking along that same line with that early guy.
Yeah.
I think it makes an interesting fan theory, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, because it definitely makes an interesting fan theory, that one.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what I think on that particular one, but yeah, there was a very, very close bond between him and his partner, whatever it was.
Yeah. And like I said, for him to risk everything, including his own life, to wait had to have been at least a decade between his partner's death and when he went after what's his face? You know,
Hector.
No, not Hector, the big guy, the big kahuna in Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I've forgotten his name.
The cartel guy. You guys know
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But
no, you're talking about. For some reason, I've forgotten the character.
I swear it starts with an E, but it doesn't matter. He's such a small little character. I think, Saul has his own show, but he's so different as Jimmy McGill on Better Call Saul than he is on Breaking Bad as Saul. It deserves at least a bit of a mention. I think the coolest thing, it's one of the coolest introductions to a character, because Jesse says, you don't want a criminal lawyer, you want a criminal lawyer. And that's how you get to know who he is at first. What did you guys, obviously, Jeff, you love him, but what else? Expound on your love for him. Why?
I mean, I think there's something about him that he doesn't really pretend, at least in Breaking Bad, he doesn't really pretend to be anything other than what he is. He is, I mean, he's probably the absolute stereotype of like a crooked lawyer that you can imagine. He's the absolute stereotype in that sense. But he's like, yeah, that's what I am. But the thing is, he is actually a very good lawyer. I mean, you find this out a little bit more in Better Call Saul. But even for Breaking Bad, you see that this guy, he really does know he is really actually is a pretty good lawyer. But it's more the fact that it's almost like, even though it's almost like he's honest about his dishonesty, you know, in a certain way in Breaking Bad. He's like, I'm a grifter, a shyster, I'm a crooked lawyer. That's what I am, you know.
Yeah, and you see that, like, one of our first introductions to him is Walt and Jesse have him standing over his own grave in the middle of the desert in the middle of the night. Anybody else would be pissing themselves, freaking out, begging for their life. And he's like, you know what? Actually, just take $1 out of my pocket, or put $1 in my pocket. Then I'm your lawyer, and you guys can tell me everything. I can't do shit about it. Like, he's selling up until like the last fucking minute. Plus, he has no qualms in telling them both he knows who they are. So, like, he's taking a huge risk by saying, "I know that's you," who at the time that was Jesse's uncle, but who was Walter and Jesse. Like, he sells it and he brings it to the edge every single time. What about you, Chris? How do you see Saul?
I see Saul as a character that was introduced to be this shyster epitome of this, like, criminal lawyer, who, because of I mean, I don't know if this is how it happened, but this is how I see it happened. Because of the quality of the writers they put together in these rooms and did the work that they did especially over the last 2-3 seasons, when things really took off, they could just see such potential in these characters to develop them into real human beings. And I think that's what happened with him. And then, of course, develop it all the way through into a prequel series. He's definitely the character who had the most potential for that out of that show, out of Breaking Bad, in terms of a spinoff, And I've been very, very happy to watch what they've done with it. I think he represents, I kind of look at these characters from a writing perspective and from the sort of the whole story arc perspective as different representations of how evil manifests in our lives. That's kind of how I see these guys, whether it's through carelessness and sort of an uncaring kind of shysterish, egotistical moral code like Saul represents, or the impulsive, I didn't mean to do bad, but it just kind of happened. And that spiral that Jesse sort of represents, and then the calculated evil that, that Gus and eventually Walter end up representing. So I think it's interesting watching the different paths to that, and how all these people end up doing, unforgivable things that are just so morally compromised. There are no excuses for it. They all know what they're doing. But how they came to do that is I think what fascinates me about the process of watching these characters and how they interact. So that, I don't know, that's kind of how I think about them.
I think one of the really brilliant things about Vince Gilligan is Saul, as he's almost a comedic relief.
Oh yeah,
in a way. And like, okay, so we were talking before the show about how much you guys love The Wire, which I respect as a show, but it is just like a fucking black cloud of a show. Like there is really very next to little or no comedic relief whatsoever. And and that which is kind of shoehorned in there a little bit too hard. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But with Breaking Bad, I mean, even the premise of the whole thing, like this high school science teacher that's going to start fucking making meth and stuff, it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek type of deal. But then you have these characters woven in, like, like Saul, or what the big guy's name that steals the weed off of Jesse. I can't remember his name, but you know what I'm talking about. Or Badger and fucking Skinny Pete. Like these people that are hilarious, but so real too. And I think that keeps it from just being this fucking depressing, either it's all about science or it's all about like the end of this man's life. And I think that's one of the reasons I love Vince Gilligan's writing so much, is because he's able to add the comedic relief of a sort into something that would otherwise be so dark, but to do so very naturally. At least I think so.
Well, I think you're right, and I think that's actually one of the contributions that Bryan Cranston helped with, because he apparently was kind of pushing in that direction from what I was reading, and I think his comedy background helped a little bit with that. Like he said, "Look, Walter White doesn't know Walter White can be funny."
Yeah.
But he was putting some funny things in there for Walter White to do. One, to break tension, because it was so dark sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And because that's how life is, like you just having some conversation with somebody and it's all serious, and then and then you say something like and all the tension, okay, good,
like the pizza.
Yes.
The pizza on the roof. Just this moment of heartbreak and anger. And by the way, he got that on the first try, which I think is fucking awesome. He just threw that thing up there first try. But yeah, I mean, it's a moment, and you can see how Walt's life is starting to crumble, how he's losing touch with his son and his family, and then he just fucking throws the piece. Like it's perfect. It just is, because there's no laugh track or anything like that distracts from it or show makes you think, oh well, this isn't real. Like it feels real and it flows well, I think. So.
Exactly. I thought the exact same thing. And when you have a show, see, this is one of the things that was so different and brilliant about Tarantino when he first hit the scene, is he questioned this idea that criminals movies, that entertainment about criminals needs to be all about the criminal activity that they're engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
These conversations that these guys would have with each other in Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, they were hilarious. They were some of the funniest conversations you've ever heard. I mean, this whole talk about, what is Like a Virgin about from Reservoir Dogs, right?
Reservoir Dogs. Joss Whedon does the same thing, where his shows are shows that have vampires in it, but it's about what's happening, and them sitting around eating ice cream or whatever. It's not about the vampires. And so in Tarantino and Whedon kind of came up about the same time. And I think they do that very well.
Well, exactly. They challenge this idea, because you go back to earlier gangster films for decades and it's all serious and solemn. And every time you see them, they're talking about criminal stuff. Mm-hmm. And so they never talk about what they're going to have for dinner. They never talk about their opinion about Marilyn Monroe. They never talk about this or that. And it breaks tension, and it makes these characters more real in a way, more human, because that's what life is like. Life is darkness and jokes and darkness and jokes and a lot of boring stuff in between. You know?
Well, I think with gangster films or whatever, I think Goodfellas was a very good example, something that broke the mold with that, where you did start seeing a little bit more of the human side of these people. You know,
and that came after Tarantino hit the scene.
Yeah,
and had influence on how Hollywood was producing those kind of movies and how they were writing them, because they wanted, you could have more depth to these characters than just their, fanatical devotion to the world of crime. You can make them a bit more human and not at the same time lessen how evil they could be.
And by making the characters more real, it makes the emotion and everything they're going through,
because it connects you,
more real to us.
That's right, because you're actually connected to that person. You can have more empathy for them because you're laughing at their jokes.
Yeah.
And then you're watching them commit a mass murder and you're like, Jesus. And it does impinge a lot harder when that's the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll go on to favorite episode. I'll start. I don't remember the name of the episode itself, but it was the one when Jesse goes to collect the money in that the meth heads had stolen, and he finds the little boy.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and he spends the whole day taking care of this little boy and feeding him. And he's dirty, and it's a terrible situation, and he's clearly been neglected. There's one channel on TV, and it's this they're selling stuff and whatever, and his parents are the meth heads that are out trying to score, and then they come back with this ATM, and she ends up dropping the ATM on the husband's head and just passing out from heroin after. Like, it's just not a lot happens in the episode, but it's so impactful and it's so real as to the, and I don't know, I've never known anybody that did meth until I moved into this town. Apparently it's big in the South. But I mean, I can only imagine it wasn't all glitz and glamour and like, they're shooting up with whatever and they're killing their own kids or something like that. It was just plain, here's a neglected child, here's two horrible people that ended up being parents, and it was sad. It was really fucking sad, but I thought it was
and it was again another one of those thematic elements of bringing in, how does evil happen? Because it's like, well, we know what drugs do to you, and we know how hardcore drugs, how fast they can be addictive, and once that spiral starts, good luck getting off that pony, right? So here's this poor kid. He's just innocence personified. That's what kids are. And there are these consequences, right? I mean, it all comes back down to what Gilligan said in one of the things was, if there's a theme to this show, it's that actions have consequences.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Jesse he starts off as this wannabe gangster kid, he is probably the best person, like with the biggest heart on the whole show. And up until this point, he's just like, yeah, I'm making money, I'm doing my thing. And then he stumbles into this and he's like, I fucking did this. Like, I am a big part of why this kid is suffering. And, you can see how much it hurts him. And everything is just so fucking real and sad. So,
right.
Well, I think one of the pivotal things to me, Jesse and his, was I think it was in the end of the third series when Walt is, because one of the things that is a recurring theme for it is Walt knows how to manipulate Jesse. That's always seems to be a recurring theme throughout there. And I think even at the very end, it was almost that, right at the very end of the whole thing, it's that whole moment when Jesse finally realizes he's broken from Walt, and he, which you're kind of really happy for him in that sense, but when he's manipulated into killing Gale, and Jesse is so he's just so consumed by guilt for that.
Yep.
And he's been very much he's been convinced by Walt to do it, and he instantly regrets it, and he is just so consumed by his guilt over, and that quite often happens with Jesse. I think that he does seem to like feel real emotional consequences in that, and sometimes he blames himself for things that aren't even entirely, like he blames himself for Jane's death. And of course, we know really it's Walt, if anyone, is responsible. Could have saved her, and he chose not to. But
actually, Walt was completely responsible, because by pushing Jesse over, he pushed Jane over, and that's how she ended up in her back.
Yeah, so, and Walt was the one responsible for that. But Jesse again, he is just consumed by guilt because he blames himself for that.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a lot of cult dynamics going on there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And but one of the reasons he doesn't tell Jesse that he was there was to keep him under his thumb, and to say, if he'd known that Walt was responsible for Jane's death, then he couldn't continue to control him. So
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is that the thing that breaks people out of those destructive relationships, those codependent relationships, whether it's cults or individuals that they're under the spell of, is generally speaking, some personal affront has to happen of such magnitude that it's undeniable to the person that it came from, this horrible, evil person that they've been devoted to or loyal to. And they have to, break with it. And Jesse, I think, started finding, I guess, maybe about 2/3 of the way through or whatever, that, he wanted to, he needed to, but he couldn't get away from this, and he was trapped in it. And then, of course, law of unintended consequences is in full play, and they end up, he ends up in this literal prison situation, having been taken hostage by these guys, who were way more evil than he ever could be.
Yeah. No.
And that was his just reward because of the decisions he had made along the way. It's just it's so complicated. Oh man, there's so many layers to it.
How about you, Chris? Which one was your favorite of all the shows, if you can pick one?
Oh, The Fly.
Really?
No.
I was gonna say, after you stopped shit about it. Hey.
My least favorite.
Okay.
I don't have like a breakdown, an episode by episode breakdown in my head, but what I do know is that when I look back on all of them, I think to the last one. Actually, the conclusion for me is what did it for me, as far as my.
I think it's called Granite State. Or is that the second to last one? I could be wrong.
The last one had a one word. It started with an F or something. I forgot what it was called. It was an odd name, but the one where I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I really wasn't. I didn't have it in my head 2 to 3 episodes before that Walt was going to go save him, or that he was going to take responsibility for what he did, or how any of this was going to go down. I mean, they were contemplating an ending at one point where Walt was the only one left alive.
Wow.
Family gets killed, Jesse gets killed, like everybody dies except him.
Damn.
That'd have been an interesting ending. You really sort of think these things through, and they could have done an amazing job with that. But Jesus, what a downer that would have been, right?
I think that would have been, because really by the midway of the 5th series, you were starting to just really any sort of like love you might have had for Walt is kind of gone by that point. You just see him as
especially when he orders the hit on Jesse. You're like, fuck no,
right.
nope, I'm out.
Kills Mike.
By accident.
Yeah, and then Hank dies.
Yeah, but strangely, there he begs for Hank's life.
Yeah,
he absolutely.
I think
begs
because
for
he
Hank's
knew
life.
Once he's dead, Hank is the one that's going to need to take care of Skylar and his daughter and son. So, can't leave Marie in charge. They'd be all fucked, which they were.
I think, this is, I can't, this is a strange thing. I mean, it's the way Walt has these relationships, because sometimes you feel that there is a part of him that, there is a part of him I think that did care for. I think there was a part of him in a strange way that did care for Jesse, although in a very, very strange and warped way. But then there's that other side of him, and it's very. I mean, like, I've often, it is sometimes very difficult to see how Walt views people, because it could be, because there is these two things going on.
Yeah. No, I think, honestly, I think Jesse is the only one that Walt ever came closest to actually loving. Even his wife, even his son. I don't think, I think what he felt, even though he did turn on Jesse in the end, he still it was always so important for him to have Jesse with him. It was always so important for Jesse to love him and to look up to him. And I think that for a sociopath, it was the closest he could get to actually loving another person.
I think, again, what kind of Chris was saying in there a bit earlier about a kind of cult dynamic, which is obviously something Chris could talk about.
We can attest to that.
You attest to that very well. But, you imagine that in a sense that Walt's that kind of that leader element that needs that love and adoration.
Well, that's the thing, because it's not that Walt didn't love his kids and that he didn't love Skylar. I mean, he absolutely did. But he was consumed by, and admitted at the end, that he loved the adventure and the excitement and the adrenaline rush of what this life was doing for him, to him, and for him. And he let himself be consumed by that. And with Jesse, there was this definite, he liked him, he loved him, as men will do. It wasn't a romantic love, but the codependency was so clearly there. How they both needed each other. They fell into this relationship where they needed each other, because Walt kept insisting Jesse had to be with him when Gus was trying to, only make it, one or the other of them, and that whole thing. So it was complicated, man. It was real complicated. But you knew it had to go to that place where Walt was going to throw anybody and everybody under the bus, because his passion for this, his the excitement of it had just consumed him so much that he lost all perspective. He lost everything.
Yeah.
That's what happens to people, and it really calls into question, in a way. I know it's a fiction show, so it's not, it's not real life, but it's interesting how it calls into question a lot of the labels that we use, because are we all born good? Are we all born potentially good? Is that even a question? I don't know, and the decisions we make and how they shape our lives. It's a tough one. That
was actually going to be my next question, the next topic. Do you think that, I mean, especially in literature, media, whatever, we're always presented with this, people are either good or evil thing. And it's not like that in the real world. Do you think that Walter White was always destined, whether he became sick or not, to become this monster of Heisenberg? Or do you think it was just, okay, go ahead.
No, I don't. I think the show shows the circumstances, that context matters, that context shapes us, that events of our life have everything to do with who we are. How could they not? I mean, this idea that you're born a saint and you're always going to be a saint no matter what circumstances you're under, I don't subscribe to that idea at all.
Yeah, me neither. And there's so much that you learn about him beforehand too, especially with him being kind of pushed out of gray matter for what, like $2,000 or something like that, and they have millions of dollars now. Is his company, and now he's this fucking high school science teacher where none of the kids even really listen to him at all, and all so that he could have married this woman who was 10 years younger than him, so he could never really live up and be a good enough husband to her. And he's got a disabled child, so he knows people see him differently as a family man. There's just so many things leading up to the point where the guy's like, you have cancer, and he's like, you have mustard on your shirt. Like, that's all he could think of in that moment. What about you, Jeff? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I said something right at the beginning that I think I don't, I think that he went from he didn't. I don't think he went from being good to being bad. As I said, I think he went from being inactive to active, in a sense that the potential was there, but it was those events did play a huge part in what happened. The events those circumstances. I mean, if you look at him really at that first episode, what he said, he was middle-aged, high school science teacher, who's, I mean, and you look at the way he's just henpecked by Skylar, and the way Hank completely emasculates him, and you can see that probably that's that's what comes out of him. I'm sure has been building for years already before the events of the show. It has been building for a long time, and this was I don't think I got to say one of my favorite episodes is in fact the pilot episode. Or certainly mainly because it had some of my favorite moments. One of my favorite moments when the first time you really see that different side of Walt, when those kids in the store are mocking his son, mocking his disabled son, and you think, oh, Walt's just walking away again or whatever. No, he comes round there and just attacks these kids and it's like, and you just see that first bit of what would become Heisenberg there. You saw that first glimpse of it.
Yeah.
Well, do you think then, I mean, in terms of activated or not activated, I would agree with that only if we say that potential lies within all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a different thing to say, well, he was always bad and it was just waiting to come out, versus he was a human being.
Yeah.
And he made choices that put him in situations where there was no other viable option for him to continue on this path except to make the bad choice.
Yeah.
And then to make the next bad choice, and then to make the next one. And he could have opted out at any point if he had been willing to abandon the goal or be a better person or take the high ground or wherever you want to put it. But he didn't. And the circumstances made it such that they were favorable to him making these bad decisions. So it was one feeding the other in a way, I think,
Yeah.
But sometimes I also think that Walt was, when when he clearly could have made sensible choices, he chose choices that were very clearly going to send him down another self-destructive path. You can see that happening.
And that was the point.
And sometimes you think, somewhere at some points you think this you're starting to see him, like, some of the choices are based on his ego. You can tell, which you can tell. I mean, when he really, if you think about it, really had a good thing going with Gus Fring right at the very beginning. He had a very good thing going there, which would have, where he would have done everything that he said he was setting out to do. But they were he was insecure about anyone else knowing the secret of his products or whatever. Like that guy Gale, he didn't. Even though Gale was far more like him than say comes to that scientific background. No, he wanted Jesse there. He didn't want Gale.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that you see late, sort of dormant in him at the beginning, was this sort of egotism and this, this sort of like, I'm all that, but it was so suppressed through all of his life. I mean, as you point out, Hank's always emasculating him, and, his wife doesn't really expect a whole lot from him. His students don't really expect a whole lot from him. So he's kind of cruising, and he's just trying to make life as life goes. This is life. Here we go, sort of doing my thing. Hasn't been the life I really wanted, but it's not a horrible life. I got these nice kids. I got this nice family, so it's all fine. But he always wanted more. And then you find out through the series, the gray matter, the company and all that other stuff. So, so you do see some of that and how the choices he made put him in situations where he sees that he can step up now. He can take charge. His ego can be satisfied, and he doesn't have to make the choice where he doesn't get what he wants anymore. He gets to get what he wants, but he has to compromise with his morals, and the compromises become worse and worse and worse as it goes.
Yes, absolutely.
Man.
So I promised I would make this go over an hour. So
yeah,
an hour.
Damn, that was quick.
But I thought one last thing, we could all go around and say who we thought was the most heartbreaking death. So, and then we wrap it up. Who wants to start?
Oh man,
Jane would be up there for me.
Yeah, Jane's father, I was thinking.
Yeah.
The air traffic controller, right? We're talking about the same, that guy. Yeah. John Delancey character. Oh man, yeah. Tragic.
I think, I mean, as much as I didn't really like Hank, you did not expect him to die there in that way, and also to be killed somewhere and just dumped in the desert like he was.
Yeah.
That was devastating. But Combo, that was the big guy that was friends with Badger and Skinny Pete, that got shot by the 11-year-old on the street when he was selling, it was early on. He was selling for Jesse, and that 11-year-old kid came and just shot him because he was on their turf. Yeah. That was the first person that was really in Jesse's orbit. It was the first time he really saw what came out of his business, and I thought that was really sad. But also Hank, because that was just, you did not know that was coming from anywhere. So
yeah, it was really up in the air what was going to happen with Hank and what was going to happen with
I think Andrea's death was pretty you remember when they just executed her right in front of Jesse. Made him watch that, and and that was heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, that was.
And it does seem heartbreaking things. Again, a lot of these things, they're things
happen to Jesse.
They happen to Jesse all the time. I mean, if anyone's kind of a victim throughout a lot of this show, it is Jesse.
Yeah.
Because I think in a lot of ways he was almost the polar opposite of Walt. He came across tough, but he really had a big heart, and he also wasn't the brightest in the world. So
that's right.
They kind of went down the same path together, but as opposites. So
exactly, got suckered into it.
But anyway, I want to thank everybody in the chat for coming and watching, and I especially want to thank Jeff, Godless Scummer, and Chris. Both of you, thank you so much for coming and doing this. It's awesome. And we'll definitely, since Jeff and I were doing The Wire anyway, you are welcome to come and do that one as well. So,
awesome, no problem. Yeah, it'll be fun.
You're welcome back anytime. And thank you to MacPig for producing for me, because I'm useless at this. But hopefully next week we'll be finishing The Sopranos. If not, I think we're doing Dollhouse. So we'll see you all next week, and catch you later. Think critically.
Right.